In this morning and new this morning, Starbucks has announced it's closing 1% of its stores and laying off 900 employees.
Starbucks just closed 100 stores in a single year. But here's what's strange. Coffee consumption in America hasn't dropped at all. So if Americans are still drinking coffee, where exactly are they going? And why is Starbucks desperately trying to hide the real answer? Here's the thing nobody tells you about Starbucks. It wasn't even a coffee shop. Back in 1971, three guys opened a tiny store at Pike Place Market in Seattle. A writer, a history teacher, and a film teacher. Not businessmen, just three nerds who really loved coffee beans. And that's all they sold. Beans, equipment, maybe a grinder if you were feeling fancy. You couldn't actually buy a cup of coffee there. Sounds crazy now, right? For 10 years, that's all Starbucks was. A small local spot with fewer than 5 locations, all in Seattle. Your grandma's knitting circle probably had more expansion plans. Then, 1982 happened. A guy named Howard Schultz walked through the door as the new marketing director. And almost immediately, he saw something the founders completely missed. See, Schultz took a trip to Milan, Italy. He wandered into one of 1,500 espresso bars scattered across the city. People weren't just grabbing coffee and leaving. They were staying, talking, laughing. The baristas knew customers by name. It hit him like a shot of espresso to the brain. America needed this. Not just beans in a bag. An experience. A place to belong. So Schultz ran back to Seattle, basically bouncing off the walls with excitement. Guys, we need to serve actual coffee. Create a whole cafe culture. The founders looked at him like he'd suggested they start selling hamburgers. We sell beans, Howard. That's the business. They thought brewed coffee was a distraction, a gimmick, something that would cheapen their brand. Well, Schultz disagreed so strongly that he eventually quit and started his own cafe chain called Il Giornale. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because Schultz wasn't done with Starbucks. Not even close. He was about to come back and change everything. And I mean everything. In 1987, Howard Schultz did something gutsy. Maybe a little crazy. He raised $3.8 million from investors. Then he walked right back to those same founders who'd rejected his vision and bought the entire company. $4 million. That's it. For context, that's less than what some people pay for a nice house in Seattle today. The moment the ink dried, Schultz started ripping out the old playbook. Bean bins moved to the back. Espresso machines moved to the front. Suddenly, you could actually sit down and drink something. But here's where Schultz got really clever. He didn't just change what Starbucks sold. He changed how they treated people who worked there. Back then, part-time workers were basically invisible. No benefits, no stake in the company. You showed up, you got paid, you went home. Schultz flipped that completely upside down. If you worked 20 hours a week, you got health insurance, you got stock options. You were called a partner, not an employee. My father worked retail in the 80s. Trust me, nobody was handing out stock options to the guy restocking shelves. Was Schultz just being nice? Partly. But he also understood something brilliant. Happy workers make better coffee. They smile more. They remember your name. They don't spit in your latte. By 1992, Starbucks went public. 165 stores. $271 million market value on day one. And then, they went absolutely berserk. Throughout the 90s, Starbucks opened a new store every single business day. Not every week. Every single day. Schultz had this phrase he kept repeating. The third place. Not home, not work. Somewhere in between where you could just exist. Americans ate it up, literally. But growing that fast? It comes with consequences nobody wants to talk about. Let me throw a number at you. 3,500 stores by the year 2000. That's not a typo. Starbucks went from 165 locations to 3,500 in 8 years. They weren't growing. They were metastasizing. And here's the truly insane part. Some stores opened directly across the street from other Starbucks locations. Same logo, staring at the same logo. Like the company was playing chess against itself. But the real magic trick? Convincing Americans to pay $4 for coffee. My dad still talks about this. 50 cents at the diner. Maybe 75 if you wanted a refill and the waitress liked you. Suddenly, people are dropping a Lincoln for a cup of bean water, and they're thanking Starbucks for the privilege. How did they pull that off? Status. Pure and simple. That white cup with the green mermaid became a fashion accessory. You weren't just drinking coffee. You were telling everyone who saw you that you had taste. You had money. You knew what a macchiato was, even if you couldn't spell it. Speaking of which, Starbucks basically taught Americans a new language. Barista. Grande. Venti. Words your grandfather would have thought were car models suddenly became part of everyday conversation. By 2008, revenue hit $10 billion annually. Let that sink in. A coffee company was generating more money than the entire economy of some countries. Iceland, Malta, entire nations with flags and armies, out-earned by a chain selling overpriced lattes. The brand got so dominant that Starbucks became a verb. People would say, "Let's Starbucks," the same way they said, "Google it." You know what happens when something grows that fast, though? When every decision prioritizes bigger, faster, more, cracks start forming, small ones at first, easy to ignore, until they're not. 2007. Howard Schultz sits down and writes a memo that was never supposed to see daylight. The subject line? The commoditization of the Starbucks experience. Translation? We sold our soul. See, Schultz had stepped away as CEO in 2000. Let someone else drive the car. And like your buddy who borrows your truck and returns it with a mysterious dent, the company came back. Different. The new leadership had a simple philosophy. Faster, cheaper, more efficient. Sounds smart on paper. Devastating in practice. Remember those fancy espresso machines where you could watch the barista work their magic? Gone. Replaced by automated push-button units that blocked your view completely. The romance of watching someone craft your drink? Traded for 6 extra seconds of speed. Here's what really stings, though. Every single store started looking identical. Walk into a Starbucks in Portland. Walk into one in Phoenix. Same chairs. Same artwork. Same soulless corporate template. That cozy neighborhood cafe, feeling that made Starbucks special in the first place? Paved over like a parking lot. And customers noticed. Boy, did they notice. Complaints poured in. The coffee tastes burnt. My latte was watered down. This doesn't taste like it did 5 years ago. Different stores, same drink, wildly different quality. My neighbor still rants about this. She ordered her usual at a new location and swears they handed her dishwater with a logo on it. Then came 2008. The economy collapsed. Banks failed. People lost homes. And suddenly, that $4 coffee seemed less like a treat and more like a luxury nobody could afford. Starbucks closed 600 stores in a single year. First major contraction in company history. The unstoppable green machine had finally stopped. But the price problems were only beginning. And what happened next? Well, it makes those 600 closures look like a warm-up act. Let's talk numbers. And I promise this won't feel like a math class. A medium latte at Starbucks right now runs you somewhere between $5.50 and $7. Depends on where you're standing. That same drink in 2019, around $4, that's a 40% jump in 5 years. Now, inflation hit everybody. Eggs got expensive, gas prices went crazy. But here's where Starbucks got greedy. They raised prices faster than almost every competitor. The bet? That customers loved them too much to leave. Bold move. Stupid move. Because here's reality. The average American paycheck hasn't grown anywhere close to 40%. Not even 20. So that daily coffee habit that used to feel like a small treat? Now it stings. Do the math with me real quick. 1 drink per day. Average cost around $6. 365 days. That's roughly $2,000 a year. On coffee. My father-in-law nearly fell out of his chair when I told him that number. He still talks about paying a quarter for coffee at the diner in 1975. Adjusting for inflation, that quarter equals about $1.40 today. Not $6. $1.40. And just when you thought the bill couldn't get worse, those tip screens started popping up. You're already paying premium prices. Now the register spins around asking for 20, 25, even 30% gratuity for handing you a cup. Older customers especially feel this squeeze. They remember when tipping was for table service at restaurants, not for someone pressing a button on an espresso machine. The psychological shift matters. Starbucks went from affordable luxury to budget burden, from daily ritual to guilty splurge. But the price tag tells only half the story. Because what you're actually drinking for that $7? Well, that might be the bigger problem. And it's not pretty. Let's talk about what you're actually drinking for that $7. A grande caramel frappuccino contains 54 grams of sugar. For context, a can of Coca-Cola has 39 grams. You're paying premium coffee prices for something sweeter than soda. And it gets worse. Starbucks has quietly transformed from a coffee company into a dessert company that happens to sell caffeine, those colorful seasonal drinks everyone posts on Instagram. Some pack more sugar than a Snickers bar. My doctor would have a heart attack just reading the menu. Here's what shocked me. I watched a TikTok where a former barista showed exactly how drinks get made. Pump after pump after pump of flavored syrup going into 1 cup. 18 pumps in some drinks. The comments section exploded with people saying they had no idea. The ingredient lists tell an ugly story too. Artificial flavors, preservatives, additives with names that sound like chemistry homework. Health-conscious customers started reading those labels and quietly walked away. Then there's the milk situation. Want oat milk instead of regular? That'll cost you an extra 70 cents. Sometimes more. Funny thing is, in many markets, oat milk actually costs Starbucks less than dairy. They're charging you extra for something cheaper. Classic move. My mother-in-law calls it paying extra for less cow. She's not wrong. The shift happened gradually. 20 years ago, Starbucks built its reputation on quality espresso. Real coffee for coffee lovers. Now their best sellers are essentially caffeinated milkshakes with whipped cream mountains on top. Older customers especially notice this change. They remember ordering a simple cappuccino and getting exactly that. Now they're bombarded with unicorn frappuccinos and cookie butter lattes that belong at a carnival, not a coffee shop. But here's the thing. While Starbucks was busy inventing sugar bombs, something else was happening. The competition got serious. Really serious. While Starbucks was busy perfecting their sugar delivery systems, the competition wasn't sleeping. They were scheming. Dutch Brodas came out of nowhere. Well, Oregon, technically. But suddenly, these little drive-through shacks started popping up everywhere. Over 900 locations now. Their secret weapon? Employees who actually seem happy to see you. Revolutionary concept, I know. Plus, their drinks cost about $2 less. My nephew calls them Starbucks with personality. He's not wrong. Then there's the real plot twist. McDonald's. Yeah, the burger people. Their McCafe espresso drinks cost nearly half what Starbucks charges. And here's the embarrassing part for Starbucks. Blind taste tests show most people can't tell the difference. Let that sink in. The company that invented Ronald McDonald is making comparable coffee. Dunkin' got smart, too. They dropped donuts from their name, modernized everything, and said, "We're the coffee for regular people who don't need a second mortgage for a latte." Brilliant positioning. But the biggest threat? Your own kitchen. Home espresso machines used to be terrible. Trust me, I owned 3 of them. Glorified paperweights. Now, a $300 machine makes drinks that rival any coffee shop. Cold brew? Dead simple to make at home. YouTube has about 10 million tutorials. Even gas stations got in on the action. Wawa, Sheetz, Buc-ee's if you're in Texas. Fresh ground coffee that doesn't taste like burnt regret. My father-in-law switched to Wawa coffee 2 years ago and hasn't looked back. Says it tastes the same and costs $1.50. Here's what really happened. Starbucks created the premium coffee market, then watched everyone else figure out how to do it cheaper, faster, and sometimes better. They trained America to appreciate good coffee. Then competitors said, "Thanks for the education." The Green Mermaid still dominates in size, but dominance means nothing when your foundation starts cracking. The numbers don't lie, and right now, they're ugly. Starbucks same-store sales dropped 6% in early 2024. That's the steepest decline since the 2008 recession. We're not talking about slow growth here, we're talking about actual shrinkage. But wait, it gets messier. The company has burned through 3 CEOs in just 2 years. 3. That's more leadership turnover than my fantasy football league. When you're cycling through executives that fast, something's broken at the top. Customer wait times tell another story. What used to take 3 minutes now takes 10 or 15 during busy hours. Why? Those complicated mobile orders I mentioned earlier. They've completely overwhelmed stores that don't have enough workers to handle them. You order ahead thinking you're saving time, then watch 6 people who walked in after you get their drinks first. And the employees? They've had enough. Unionization efforts have spread to over 400 stores. Workers are citing impossible workloads, inadequate pay, and the stress of making 17-ingredient TikTok drinks while a line wraps around the building. Can't blame them, honestly. The stock market noticed, too. Starbucks shares have dramatically underperformed compared to the broader market. Billions in shareholder value. Gone. Here's the really telling part, though. Howard Schultz came back to save things. Again. Then he left. Again. Now Brian Nichols sits in the captain's chair, facing a brand that many Americans have simply written off. Too expensive. Too unhealthy. Too out of touch. My local Starbucks used to have a line out the door every morning. Drove past it last Tuesday. 4 cars. That's it. The Green Mermaid isn't dead. Let's be clear about that. Over 38,000 locations worldwide don't disappear overnight. But the empire that once seemed invincible? It's showing cracks that keep getting wider. And some cracks can't be fixed with another pumpkin spice launch.